Hello everyone and welcome to The No Show. I'll be your host Nathan Orenstein, and today I'm going to be ranking every movie directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Well, this will be part 1 of my Shyamalan ranking because he has 15 movies I'm going to be covering over a 2-video span. If you're unfamiliar with M. Night Shyamalan, he has probably had the biggest roller coaster of a career of anyone in movies over the past 30 years. He's a writer-director that was at one point heralded as the next Spielberg, making smart blockbuster after smart blockbuster at an incredibly young age. But not long after that, he found himself in one of the biggest slumps in filmmaking history, producing a decade's worth of slop so bad it nearly got him run out of Hollywood before he rebounded in the mid-2010s. Overall, I'd say his career is just about half good, half bad, so that's how I'm going to split up these two movies. And if you're unsure if you'd be interested in any of his movies, they're mostly thrillers with some horror and supernatural elements sprinkled in a lot of the time. He's also very much known for his twist endings, for better or worse. I do want to mention that I won't be including his debut independent film Praying with Anger on this list, as the only version of this movie I could find anywhere was a super low resolution version on YouTube, and it just didn't seem fair to compare that to the rest of the movies. Also, I've seen some of these movies more than once, some of them I haven't, but I have watched all of them in the last month or so. Alright, without further ado, let's kick off the first half of my M. Night Shyamalan ranking. Coming in as M. Night Shyamalan's worst film is 2013's After Earth. It follows a space ranger played by Will Smith and his son played by Jaden Smith, who crash land on an abandoned Earth somewhere in the distant future. Will Smith breaks his legs in the crash, and Jaden has to traverse the dangerous wilderness to get to a place where he can send a beacon for help. After Earth is truly the Smith family vanity project, of course starring the real-life father and son duo, as well as being produced by Will, his wife, his brother-in-law, and his former manager. Shyamalan is the other lone producer, but it's clear that this was hardly his movie. Regardless, it's got his name attached as director, so we gotta put it on the list. And wow, this was an easy choice for the bottom spot for me. There's so much I can say about this, but I'll touch on the bigger points. Who thought it was a good idea for Will Smith, one of the most charismatic people in Hollywood, to play a stone-faced soldier whose lack of emotion rivals that of a robot? And who thought it was a good idea for him to be stuck in a crashed spaceship for an entire film? And who thought it was a good idea for inexperienced child actor Jaden Smith to carry the bulk of the film on his shoulders? Well, the answer to all these questions seems to be Will Smith and his family, and they were able to recruit Shyamalan to direct the project. It's boring, it's awkward, it's ugly, it's poorly conceived, and it's honestly just one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Shyamalan has plenty of films that are bad in a way that they're at least fun to watch. This is not one of them. Steer clear. At number 14, we have 2006's Lady in the Water. It follows the manager of an apartment complex, played by Paul Giamatti, who discovers a young woman, played by Bryce Dallas Howard, in the swimming pool. He learns that she's some sort of water nymph whose life is in danger from a mythical wolf creature that's trying to keep her from returning to her world. Lady in the Water is notable because it marks the beginning of the decade-long skid that I referred to earlier, but it really isn't notable for anything else. I'd argue that this is probably his single most forgettable movie. It's also one that just doesn't make any sense to me. It's got this fairy tale story sort of background, but is also trying to be a PG-13 thriller with adult-leaning themes such as faith in the unknown and discovering your purpose. None of it comes together well, and none of it is entertaining. I also get the sense that Shyamalan himself didn't even think he had a complete story on his hands, as there are probably 30 minutes or so of this that are completely pointless because the characters were fed some bad information and then had to essentially restart what they were doing. If you take that part out though, the story is still just bad, and once you further strip away the unimpressive and uninteresting fairy tale stuff, the movie is just incredibly simple and incredibly boring. Like After Earth before it, there's no reason to watch this one. At number 13, we have 2008's The Happening. It follows Mark Wahlberg and Zooey Deschanel as they travel across Philadelphia, trying to avoid some sort of viral disaster that is inexplicably causing mass suicides. The Happening is, without a doubt, Shyamalan's most bizarre movie. I think the concept is actually fairly strong, and I honestly don't hate the explanation for this happening that the movie provides. There are also a handful of moments here that are genuinely great, really selling how unsettling and mysterious this whole situation is. But the surrounding movie is just one of the weirdest messes I've ever seen on film. Shyamalan himself describes it as a, quote, excellent B-movie, but the film also never gives the impression that it's aware of its B-movie status. It gives the impression that it has no idea what it is. Is it a natural disaster thriller? Is it a horror movie? Is it a black comedy? Is it all of the above? I honestly couldn't tell you, and I doubt the people involved could tell you either. Mark Wahlberg's performance has given birth to countless memes at this point, but it's really the entire cast as a whole that's giving some of their worst work. It really boils down to Shyamalan's lack of understanding of his own film and his subsequent inability to direct his cast with a strong hand. It is certainly worth a watch, though, just to see how incredible of a train wreck it really is. And like I said, it does have some strong moments. But overall, this is a bizarre mess of a film that seems to be just as confused with itself than audiences are with it. At number 12, we have 2019's Glass. Serving as a sequel to both Unbreakable and Split, it sees David Dunn and Elijah Price from Unbreakable and Kevin Wendell Crumb from Split all put in the same mental facility where they're told that they only have delusions of being superheroes and do not, in fact, have any superhuman powers. While this may not be Shyamalan's worst film, it is easily my least favorite. I won't go into too much detail with this one, seeing that it's his only sequel and I don't want to spoil anything about the films that come before it, but I would argue that this movie effectively weakens both of those two films. Unbreakable came out 19 years before this, and for a sequel that long in the making, it really doesn't do a single interesting thing that warrants that wait, nor does it provide an interesting follow-up to Split. It's just not interesting in general, and it turns interesting characters into boring ones. The story and its subsequent plot twists are truly eye-rolling too, and the movie really thinks it's a lot smarter than it is with all its metatextual commentary on superheroes and comic books. If nothing else, it is nice to see these characters again, since they truly are some of Shyamalan's most exciting to watch, but honestly, the movie completely fails to justify its existence beyond this point. It is an unwarranted sequel and one that attempts to drag its previous films down with it. I hate it. At number 11, we have 1998's Wide Awake. During his 5th grade year, 10-year-old Joshua A. Beale begins a personal search to find answers about life and death, a journey triggered by the passing of his beloved grandfather. Wide Awake was Shyamalan's American studio debut, and it's honestly unrecognizable from anything of his that came after it. It's a Catholic children's comedy movie about a 10-year-old literally trying to find God. Go figure. I don't have much to say about this one, honestly. It's just your run-of-the-mill bad children's movie. The child actors aren't any good, the religious stuff is way too surface level to be interesting, and the jokes are almost exclusively aimed at children. It hardly seems fair comparing it to his more widely appealing films, but it is what it is. He does hit us with his very first plot twist, though, even in a kid's movie, but boy is it bad. I will say, the flashback scenes between Joshua and his grandfather are legitimately touching, and provide some of the better emotional moments across Shyamalan's entire filmography. Other than that, though, this is his least known movie for a reason, and I'm not going to be the one to tell you to watch it. At number 10, we have 2010's The Last Airbender. It's based on the first season of the beloved Avatar The Last Airbender show, and it follows Aang, a young avatar who must master all 4 elements of Earth, Water, Fire, and Earth, and restore balance to the world while stopping the Fire Nation from conquering the Water Tribes and the Earth Kingdom. It might be surprising to some of you to see this so high on the list, as many people consider this to be one of the worst movies of all time, but I just don't feel that way, clearly. I never watched the show, so maybe that's why I don't hate it as much. Anyway, this still isn't any good. It's based on a single 20-episode long season of television, meaning that everything feels incredibly rushed, but it's also an incomplete story. There just isn't a sense of focus here, as the plot is constantly jumping around to try to accommodate a story that is ultimately too big for a single movie. Other than that, it's just kind of whatever. I don't have anything to praise, but I also don't have anything to complain too much about either, other than the stuff I've already mentioned. It looks and feels like it was made to be on Nickelodeon, which really isn't great for a theatrical release, but it's far from the worst thing in the world and far from his worst movie, in my opinion at least. At number 9, we have 2021's Old. It follows a group of people who get stuck on a beach that causes them to age rapidly. Old is probably Shyamalan's simplest film to date, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. The concept allows him to just throw a ton of ideas at the wall and see what sticks, and honestly, there really are a lot of interesting ideas here, even if they aren't all great. Of the 12 or so people on the beach, there is a wide range of ages and backgrounds, allowing him to really dive into how the aging thing affects all these different people in different ways. Of course, the children are affected the most, but it's interesting to see how the adults are affected as well. The first half of Old is a frantic and exciting experience, as new things are constantly happening and they have to figure out how to deal with it and understand it all. The second half settles down a bit and frankly isn't nearly as interesting, but I think Old is still worth watching for that first half alone. Unfortunately, Old might feature Shyamalan's worst dialogue he's ever written, and with that, some of the worst performances he's ever directed. It's hard not to laugh through so much of this film, despite it coming across as dead serious. The plot twist is also horrendously dumb, and it might be my least favorite of all the ones he's ever written. I think maybe this central concept just needed a bit more time in the oven for Shyamalan to truly build a great movie around it, but Old just isn't that, and it's still pretty bad overall. And to end the first half of the ranking, at number 8, we have 2024's Trap. It follows a serial killer played by Josh Hartnett as he attempts to evade police capture while attending a massive concert with his daughter. Shyamalan's newest film lands right in the middle of my ranking, but is definitely still a bad movie. The most notable issue here is that none of the characters talk like human beings. The dialogue is incredibly awkward, even by Shyamalan standards, and the performances rival those in The Happening in terms of their absolutely bizarre direction. I can 100% see Hartnett getting the same meme treatment that Wahlberg got all those years ago. The whole plot is also just ridiculous. Every single thing that happens in this movie is a case of right place at the right time, and it really demands you to suspend any disbelief you might have. I do think it is entertaining for the most part at least, even if a lot of that entertainment value is from the shock of the audacity of this screenplay. And even if it is ridiculous at pretty much every turn, there are still some really exciting moments, and I think some of the story beats were actually pretty interesting. There is definitely a palpable tension here pretty much from start to finish, and I was always curious to see where the story would take things next. It's a bad movie, but it's the least bad of Shyamalan's bad movies, and I think it's probably the most watchable movie on the list so far. I hope you all enjoyed the first half of my ranking of every M. Night Shyamalan movie, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of these films down below if you've seen any of them. And of course, feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. Stay tuned for the second half of this list coming in just a few days. I've been Nathan Orenstein with The No Show. Thanks for watching.